Welcome back to Mystery Garage. In today's episode, we play with the VR6. Welcome back to today's episode. So, after all the feedback I got and people really loved this car, I thought what better thing to do right now to break up some bodywork on this project is to get to work a little bit on this VR6. Now, over the last week or two, I've kind of been trying to figure out for myself, what do I want to do with this car now? Originally, when I built this car a while back, I built it to be a very well-rounded car. Obviously I have a family and I have kids, so I wanted it to be a Sunday driver. I wanted to have a lot of performance and that sort of thing, but it still has all the seats in it, so I can take the family out for a drive. I built it to be a sleeper, which is why it has the steel wheels on it. And the 5-lug swap complicated that a little bit for wheel choice anyway, so it was easy to go with the steel wheels. I like the look, a sleeper, the clean. It's got all the factory blue interior in it. It does have the Recaros as well, but a lot of it was meant to retain some of its factory look. Now that I have the choice of the red car now, and that's going to be my classic build and kind of my shower style car, that sort of thing, then this one now is left to be kind of future undetermined. So I figured, let's determine the future of this car. I want to build this car or finish this car out as a performance track style car. I think if this is my performance track style car, and that car right there is my classic Sunday driver, more show quality car, then let's follow through with that. So I'm going to show a picture right here of a car that I've loved from the beginning of the day I've ever seen it. And something about the Vroomerang style, which is a Japanese Euro tuning company, I really like the way that car looks. I'm not going to build that car exactly the same. I'm not going to go with the same graphic package, but I'm going to, even though I do love that graphic package, I'm going to do something on my own, but I'm going to go with the whole Berg Cup kit type setup that picture showed, and I'll show it again one more time so you can get a better look at it. So in order to pull that off, I think Berg Cups look funny with square headlights, and very few people ever have it. So I am going to do a full front end swap, a core support swap to a round headlight setup. Running that Berg Cup kit allows me to widen the track width on the car, and I'm going to take apart the interior. I'm going to make it more of a race style, track style setup where I'm going to take out the Recaros. I'll use that in a different project, and I'll put kind of racing seats in it and keep it a two-seater. That being said, I'll do a bunch of other mods now moving forward in making this more of a track style build. So we'll make it more aggressive. It is a pretty rowdy car. We'll make it even more rowdier. Go a little bit crazy on this car, whereas this car will be a little bit more, for looks and show and custom and kind of get the real Volkswagen vibe with this one. This one will be more of a road pounder, kind of Sunday beast, that sort of thing. So I just want to let you know that before we get started on today. So let's move over into talking about putting this supercharger on this engine. First things first, let's get the supercharger on this engine. One thing I want to point out, when I put it together originally to complete it all in one motion, to get the engine in, get the powertrain set up, get kind of everything ready to go. And then once everything was ready and running and I was comfortable with it, I was going to take it all back apart and build it again properly. So what I meant by that is I was going to put all the powertrain in it, be all happy with what holes I was keeping and what holes I wasn't, what I was going to shave and what I wasn't. Once I was set up with the supercharger in and the engine set up and all that kind of thing, I was just going to pull it all back out, and then we'll start cleaning up the bay and going to paint. So I will still do that, except for when this time around now, different than before. When we get to pulling the engine out, we're going to change the core support and all that sort of stuff to get ready for that Berg Cup kit. So right now, what do we want to do? I want to get that supercharger in for good, be happy with its setup, make sure I've laid it all out appropriately. We're going to do some driving around in a bit, test it, make sure I'm happy with the way it's set up and running before we ever pull everything back out again. So as you can see before, I did set it up and I did put it in. However, I didn't drive with it before. I bought this setup, and I'll show you it real quick here. I bought this supercharger setup. It's a VF9 Vortex Stage 2 kit, and I bought it secondhand, maybe even third hand, technically speaking. I think it's been through a few owners, and like I've said before, the channel's built on a budget. So is everything that I do. I don't spend a lot of money on these parts because I don't really have a lot available, but what I was looking to do with this stuff is pick up a kit relatively cheap and show to myself that I don't need a off-the-shelf kit it's okay to find a kit that's maybe not perfect and work through making it work. So kind of what I have set up here is a lot of what was left with the system after 2 or 3 owners have used it. Now, the supercharger, before I bought this package, I actually traded for it, but before I traded for this package, the supercharger was just recently rebuilt. So it basically has the lifespan of a brand new system, so I'm not really worried about that. What the challenge comes from is a lot of these parts, the little pieces, have all been kind of picked and choose. You can see, you know, engineering kit, so it's got some of the boots, but then it also has like a kinetic boot, and it's got, you know, an oil pan that's been tapped in a way that I necessarily wouldn't do it. You know, it's got a few, you know, the wiring, some of the wiring that came with it has been obviously cut off different cars. It's got injectors that I've cleaned since I got them, but are upgraded injectors that go with the kit. Like I said before, this is a stage 2 kit, so it does have, this is just an ECU that's been chipped. So rather than chipping my current ECU, I was just going to swap this chipped ECU in. And then all the bracketry and that sort of thing. I did test it on, like I said before, I've had it on the car before. I just made sure that I had majority of the parts, and I was having a running issue with the car, so I decided to take it off before I fully installed it. So in this episode, maybe it's going to take 2 episodes, we're going to get this thing fully installed, then we're going to go for a rip. So starting today, I really wanted to get at putting this thing back on. So what I actually did off camera is I've gone and picked up a couple parts to do this properly. So on this install, we're going to do it right. I'm going to change the way this is set up. First of all, this pan's been rashed pretty bad. I'm actually not going to use this pan. I'm going to use the reinforced pan I have on the car. So we're going to go through the steps of actually tapping our own pan for the drain for the oil system on this unit. We're also going to talk about the feed of the oil system on this unit, and this was the drain hose for the oil line that goes back into the pan. I'm actually going to redo that in AN, and we'll talk about all that. We'll go through all these different pieces I have and what I have and how, if I want to keep it or redo it. Things like this catch can. You know, this was obviously made at some point to work, and it does work, but I don't know if it's aesthetically pleasing enough for me, or if that I want to make some changes to it. We'll see how that goes when we go to throw it on. One of the things we should talk about is this car was in, or sorry, this supercharger was in a Mark II VR6 when I bought it, and so that car had power steering, AC, that kind of thing. So this car, or sorry, my car, I have fully deleted. So really the only accessory, and hopefully you can see that, the only accessory I really have on here is the alternator. So I don't have power steering, I don't have AC, all that's been deleted. The system is very simple. And in talking to the guys from S&P, you know, we were both kind of doing the same thing around the same time, and we were talking about, hey, putting this stuff in a Mk1, we run into challenges of the belt, the serpentine belt operation to make sure that it's properly turning the belt, all the pulleys in the right direction without having all those extra pulleys in the system. So we don't have an AC pulley in the system. I don't have any dummy pulleys. It's just a simple system. So I went out and bought the proper belt. The guys from S&P actually helped me because they were doing it at the same time. We talked about our belt rotation, and they actually found a belt that fits. So I bought that one. Also, let's talk about this ugly hole real quick. Again, when I bolted this supercharger on before, I needed to cut that hole to be able to get the supercharger to rotate properly. So I never finished that job. That's a super ugly cut. I just got it that way so I could throw the supercharger in and be happy with that. In this group of episodes that we make to supercharge this car, I will be finishing that properly, as well as doing with all the rotation, and we'll kind of get through all that. So first and foremost, in this project, at least for today, what I want to do is a couple things. I want to get this car up in the air. I'm going to take the whole front apart because I do want to have access to the inner panel here, and I'll show you why in a little bit. We'll probably bolt on the supercharger to show you the placement, and we'll talk about a bunch of other little things. But for now, let me get to work, and we'll meet back here in a moment. So anybody who watched me struggle right there knows the pain I just went through. So this car has never had its fender removed, and especially in the later Mark 1s, the ones made in the US, they got crazy with the seam sealer in all of this area, and for good purpose. Obviously these cars had a bit of rust issues, and so the more and more later into the Mark 1s, they started throwing more and more seam sealer on it. But these fenders, you can see, are just totally glued on almost. So much seam sealer on all this area. You can see all right here, this is all just seam sealer, it's just gooped on there. And the hard part is, especially with these later ones, is trying to remove this fender without damaging it. You know, you can see there's seam sealer over top of all of this seam all the way down. Two things. One, you can see how rust-free this car is. I was really blessed with getting a car in this great of a condition for this VR6 swap. Two, as you can see, you know, this fender's never been off, and it was quite the wrestle to get it off. No, it's a little bright outside right now, but let me show you. You know, getting that seam sealer cut is impossible. Now, I did obviously fast forward through that scene, but just in case anybody wants to do that or do this job to their car, it takes time. You know, it probably took me realistically about 45 minutes just to get this fender off. It's a lot of work, but you know, it's got to get done. Okay, so as you can see, as I was just saying, you know, this condition of this car is in great shape. There's no rust anywhere. The only issue with this core support, and I'm going to be changing it, like I said, to the round headlight version for the Berg Cup kit anyways, but this big dent right here, and there's some strange outer rounding right there with that. And I always knew that was there, and one day I intended on repairing that, but now that I'm going to switch the front end anyways, it just makes that situation so much easier. Now, I'll get to taking off the intake system, and I'll show you why exactly I took this fender off in a few minutes, so let me get to it. Woo-wee, she is on and looking fresh. Okay, so with the supercharger being on, it's really just roughly bolted in. As you can see, hopefully we can get there. You can see the belt alignment is perfect. Just so everybody who does know, obviously these VF9 superchargers are belt driven. So belt drive works out just fine. You can see barely, that's the old drain line that used to be on it. And you can see there's some frame issues with how it, so this is the rotation I was referring to, and you can see just at the end there it's starting to hit, so I'll have to trim right there a little bit, especially after I redo that fitting, which I'll show you in a bit. And again, the reason why I took this fender off is because I'm going to modify the inside of here, because you can see the inlet to the supercharger is right here, and in order to do this properly, you have to have a tube that goes down to having your MAF sensor underneath. The tube I have, or the one in question I should say, is this tube right here. So it's got some tie-ins for some of your crankcase ventilation stuff and that sort of thing. So when we bring it back to the car, let me just adjust the camera here. The actual tube lives down in here, and essentially it's supposed to bolt up to the supercharger like that. So why I did this is it needs more clearance for this pipe to be able to fit. It also has to then fit, a little bit hard to see, has to be able to fit between that frame and this wall section. So that's priority number one, is to get this tube hooked up, which I never did before. Number two is we're going to work on the feed and the drain line. So as you can see, one of the things VR6s aren't good at, Mark 1s, is creating a lot of room. So I know it's really hard to see, but this is, let me just get it out here. This is the oil feed for this supercharger. So what we're going to have to do, and it'd be easier to show you, we're going to tuck it down there, but easier to show you one of my spare engines. You can see right here, These are two, I'm gonna get them wrong, but one of them is a pressure and one is a temp sensor. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take out one of them on the motor that's in the car and put in a T that allows a feed off the side to then feed the supercharger, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Okay, so first things first, I think I'm gonna just tackle this part first. I'm gonna mark out the lines on the car, which will essentially be making a hole in this portion here to allow this pipe to then be put on and fit perfectly. So I'm gonna take some time to figure this out correctly, and then when the supercharger is in and bolted on, you'll see that it'll mate right up to this portion there. Okay, leave me to it for a little while. This is gonna take some time. Okay, so here's an update where we're at. So I've roughed in this pipe. As you can see, it fits perfectly there. And I'm gonna adjust this a bit. So you can see where it kind of goes through this piece. So you can see it hooks up here, cuts through to the other side, and actually pops up underneath the bottom of the frame rail. So it actually fits in a Mk1 pretty neatly as long as you make that hole cut good. And obviously when I finish that hole out a lot better, I'll trim it out and all that kind of thing. So make it look nice. Also, before anybody complains in the comments, as you can see there, I did bag that intake to make sure nothing got in. I bagged the outlet as well as I bagged the throttle body. So there's no issues of any junk getting in there, just so nobody panics in the comment section. Anyway, so there we go. That's all set up like that. And I'm gonna climb underneath here and show you what we got going on. Okay, so kind of hard to see, but I'll show you where best I can. You can see that drain line right there is contacting both the Eurowise front bar as well as that frame. So I'm gonna have to notch that a bit. And like I said, I am gonna be converting that to AN, so I need even a little bit more room. So I'll have to figure out, that's a challenge. And then what I'm gonna show you for the feed, sorry, like I said before, this is the feed line that I've just kind of stuffed down there for now. I'm probably gonna pass it, it's hard to see, I'll pass it over this sensor and then down behind the alternator and then down. But I'll show you on the spare motor I built, just because you're never gonna be able to see what I'm gonna do. I mocked up what my plan is. So a little fitting here into a T, obviously there's the original pressure sensor, and out the side will be the feed. So I've just mocked it up on this motor to show you, because there's no way I can show you in the car. That's essentially going to be the feed, and then the drain we're going to drain into the pan. Now, part of me thinks there shouldn't be anything wrong with putting a drain into the front of the pan. Only reason I say that is because if you look up top here, oh, hold on. It drains right here, so it would be simplest form to just come and drain right here rather than going around the back of the engine past all the pulleys. I'm thinking I'm going to put it somewhere right here, so that way it's just a straight drain to the pan. I don't really see a problem with that. If anything, I guess forward motion would help it get into the pan, but it is the shallow side of the pan. But either way, when you're this high up on the pan, you're going to be well above scavenging oil. So anyways, I'm thinking I'm going to go right here, make it the most simplest form. I'm not passing any moving parts. If I go the other way, it's the pulleys in the engine as well as the drive shaft and that sort of thing are going to have to be in the way to get that drain line back in. I don't want any issue of having anything rub holes or anything like that where I wouldn't notice that we're pouring oil over the ground. So anyways, I think here is the best place to put it. I'm gonna have to blast off this pan, clean it up, mark it up, and weld in the bung, and then we'll have a short little AN line from there to here for drain. So that's feed and drain. Those are the hardest parts about this whole thing. The rest of it is just plugging up a bunch of hoses and putting in the ECU. So what I'm gonna do to get back to work here is I'm gonna pull all this off one more time. I'm gonna clean away especially now that I have this hole here. I can actually reach into that frame and do a better job of kind of cutting and trimming that frame up that's in there. And I'll actually show you where it interferes with the, actually I can show you right now. It should be simple enough. Let's get this adjusted here. Take this off. You can see right here where the unit passes all this area, and when it rotates, you can see that it needs to swing into where that frame is. So that's kind of where I've chopped it in there. I am going to finish cut this part here. I'm actually going to probably trim it down a bit and then make a real nice finished edge. That's kind of my goal there. But now that I have this access point, this is going to be way easier for me to trim all this stuff in here out to make a real good job of it. And then I'm probably going to join this back up with this with some sort of small bars on the outside or something to that effect. I think it's good that not just this portion is reinforcing this outer shell. I'll do some other kind of reinforcement in a little while. All right, well, I got a lot done. Took care of a ton of stuff on camera, just in the mock-up stages. So there we are. Supercharger is relatively in. I test fit the belt. I went through and did a lot of the plumbing to make sure everything was good. So the crankcase ventilation pipe goes down to the bottle here for the separator, and then it goes down into the charge pipe, which I haven't clamped that on yet. All this is just set on, that's why there's no clamp here, no clamp here. I'm just kind of setting it on for the fit. Then we have the supercharger blow-off valve, which is more or less set up to recirc, so it comes back down and then goes back into the boost pipe just inside here, and back into this tube, which goes back into the intake. The supercharger oil feed is hooked up with that setup that I showed you guys before, down under there. If you follow the intake pipe right here, it comes down to the MAF sensor, which I have plugged in. I am going to have to come up with some sort of intake that fits that void right there. So we got an intake filter that fits the void right there. I had to cut that bracket, and I got to do a lot more trimming on it to make sure I have room for a filter, which I'll source. One of the issues I did run into is there, oops, just hit the camera. There is a bolt. Let's see if I can show you that better. 1 second. Right there, right where my finger is here, there's a bolt head right there that actually this belt kind of pushes up against. So I'm gonna have to remove that bolt and figure out what I'm gonna do. I hope maybe I can just goop it up and that's not gonna leak, but that's the main bearing, sorry, main seal, front main seal. So hopefully without that bolt it's not too big of a deal, but with this routing, with only the alternator and the supercharger, there isn't a lot of belt options. When it comes into checking out, and who would have thunk it, it's easier to work with the headlight removed. Ever since I removed the headlight, it was way easier to work, and I'll have to blast the headlight back in later. But you can see with the frame where I kind of finished notched it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, sorry for my hand, but I'm going to make a belly pan in there more or less that covers underneath that section, which is why I trimmed up both sides level with each other, so it'll make kind of like almost like a skateboard style shape in there that'll cover that tray off, and I'll weld it on both sides once everything's removed. I still do currently have that elbow. I didn't make the drain yet. We'll make that next episode. But I want to try and change that setup. The setup I have that I bought for AN is actually too long. So I'm going to do an elbow that goes into a -8 as opposed to the setup I have right now, which is a fitting, and that goes into a straight dash, or sorry, it goes into a straight dash 8 into an elbow and fitting. It's just too long, so I'm going to try and find a shorter version so we get lots of travel. The supercharger is fully adjusted right now, so I have great belt tension. Everything's fantastic there, and you can see kind of the setup is like pretty well done for now. Obviously, a ton of finishing still to do. Gotta trim out all those edges, make everything look all clean. You know, kind of prep all this for finishing down the road. But what I'd like to try and do is next episode, we'll throw in that front pan tap, where we'll put it right about here somewhere. We'll throw that in there. We'll find some sort of intake solution. Hopefully you can see that. So the MAF is right here. You need some sort of intake filter right there. And then we need to button everything back up. I need to work on all the finishing touches. But pretty happy with the progress we made today. It was a lot of work, but we're very close to having everything set up. I still got to bolt in the ECU. But other than that, everything else is kind of figured out. It's not final bolted in here like I said before. Everything's still sitting in here relatively loose. So I'm going to blast everything back off, do a lot of cleaning up around the edges, that sort of thing. We'll do the oil pan tap. We'll do a lot of the supporting work that we still haven't done yet, some of the smaller stuff, and put all the clamps on, that kind of thing. And then hopefully next episode we'll swap the ECU. There we go. We'll swap the ECU and we'll be ready to go. All right, guys, thanks for watching today's episode. This is episode number 1 of Supercharging the VR6. Next episode, like I said, we'll work on tapping the pan, doing all the final bolt ups. Make sure everything's clean and ready to go. I am going to change the oil before I start the supercharger, and we'll change the ECU that's in the car, and hopefully be ready to go. Thanks everybody for this episode. We look forward to seeing you guys' comments and seeing what you think about this so far, and we look forward to next episode, part number 2. All right, guys, for now, take care. Thanks very much. See you next week.